Murphy Johnson became famous after his wife, Molly, posted a photo of their bedroom mirror on social media in 2015. The mirror featured a list of 13 items titled Reasons I Love My Wife, including lines such as "She's my best friend," "She makes me laugh every day," and "She's the kindest person," among others. 2 years after that post, Molly passed away. The official cause of death was ruled as suicide from a drug overdose. However, her family and friends believe her husband was responsible for her death. Suspicion intensified in the summer of 2023 when it emerged that Murphy Johnson had kidnapped a teenager. According to the indictment, he abducted a 16-year-old girl and held her captive for around 6 weeks. He allegedly tied her to a bed, assaulted her, inflicted knife wounds, forced her to take drugs, and recorded videos of these acts. Murphy Johnson was sentenced to life in prison, while his 21-year-old girlfriend, Olivia Henn, received a 23-year prison sentence as an accomplice. Friends and family of Murphy Johnson's deceased wife, who passed away in 2017, told journalists they are convinced he had a hand in her death. They claim that the man once seen as America's kindest husband abused his wife and coerced her into relationships with other men. 7 months after the mirror photo went viral, in 2016, Molly filed a police report claiming her husband was beating her and threatening to kill her. However, she withdrew the complaint in 2017. "He subjected me to physical abuse, hitting me on the back and abdomen, on my head and arms, pushing me down and forcibly taking my purse, money, and phone so I couldn't escape," she stated in the report, as cited by journalists. Shortly after her visit to the police, Molly quit her job due to cuts and bruises on her body, her friends shared with journalists. These marks reportedly appeared after her husband forced her into intimate encounters with other men. She sent friends photos of her bruises and cuts and mentioned wanting a divorce but feeling too scared to proceed, fearing he would kill her and stage it as a suicide. In December 2017, after Molly was found dead, her husband claimed she had taken her own life. He insisted on cremating her body, preventing a full investigation, according to friends and acquaintances. They also pointed out that the fentanyl level in her blood was far too low for a typical suicide. It's been a few months since Christmas, and I'm just now getting around to telling the story of what happened on Christmas. My family and I decided to celebrate the holiday not at home, but at my father-in-law's house. We thought it would be more fun, and relatives were coming from another city, so it promised to be a big, noisy gathering. My wife, children, and I arrived at my father-in-law's house early to help with the preparations. Everything went as usual. We decorated the house, put up the Christmas tree, and prepared treats. Soon the relatives began to arrive, and the house was quickly filled with laughter, conversation, and the anticipation of the holiday. After greeting everyone, we all sat down at the table. My father-in-law had clearly gone all out, setting a table with everything you could want, all with a festive Christmas theme. The conversation was lively and, as is often the case in such gatherings, people became closer and less inhibited. Of course, there was a wide variety of drinks from champagne to cognac to keep the spirits up. I vividly remember the fireworks, though I can't remember everything. After dinner, we all went outside to watch the fireworks, then came back in, frozen and warmed up with a little more to drink. As the celebration reached its climax, the evening continued with more toasts and jokes. Some of us decided to move to the kitchen for a quieter spot to smoke and get a little break from the noise. Of course, smoking was paired with another round of drinks. In this semi-relaxed atmosphere, time seemed to fly by. I was beginning to feel tired after all the festive excitement. I decided to take a short rest to regain my strength. Nearby, I noticed an empty room with a cozy-looking bed, a real salvation at that moment. Without a second thought, I lay down on the bed, expecting just a few minutes of rest. Instead, exhaustion took over and I fell into a deep sleep. I began to regain consciousness much later that night, after all the fun and drinking. Still in a fog of sleep, I instinctively reached for a warm figure beside me, thinking it was my wife. I embraced her with warmth and tenderness, assuming it was her. I thought how nice it was to share this closeness after such a long day. As I became more fully awake, I slowly became aware of my surroundings and realized that I wasn't at home. I was in my father-in-law's house, and next to me was my mother-in-law. Memories from moments before suddenly hit me with a strange mixture of shock and embarrassment. In the fog of my mind, I had mistaken her for my wife. Determined to break the awkward silence, I quietly asked if she was awake. She calmly replied that she was. Trying to collect myself, I said, "I'm going to get a drink of water, hoping to clear my mind." She just nodded and reminded me to hurry, as the guests would be waking up soon. I made my way to the kitchen, gulped down a glass of water, and took a moment to collect my thoughts. I knew I would have to talk to her about this strange, unexpected event at some point. The festivities continued as the house came back to life, filled with the joyful sounds of family, and soon everyone gathered for breakfast. My wife, unaware of anything unusual, joined us, and the party continued seamlessly. At one point, my mother-in-law and I were alone in the kitchen having a quiet smoke. I gathered my courage and asked why she hadn't stopped me that night. Her answer surprised me. She didn't want me to feel embarrassed and said she would do anything to make me feel comfortable. Since that night, things have returned to normal on the surface. We still visit her sometimes, and she acts as if nothing unusual has happened. But in the back of my mind, I know I need to clarify my feelings and have an honest conversation with her. Maybe it's time to sort through this moment, for both of our sakes, and make sure it doesn't affect our family in any way. Frank Robinson looked like a man who had been through a lot but never lost his taste for life. Despite his age, he was still a strong man with a sharp mind and a firm grip. When he first saw Monica in a small, shabby diner on the outskirts of the city, she was like a breath of fresh air. Young, energetic, with long blonde hair framing her beautiful face, she smiled at him as she served coffee, and every move she made felt like a promise of something more. Frank became a regular at the place, and soon they began talking. At first, it was small talk about the weather and how boring life in a small town could be. But soon their conversations turned more personal. "I've always dreamed of leaving this place," Monica admitted one day when they were almost alone in the diner. "But it seems like I'm stuck here." Frank nodded, thoughtfully swirling the coffee in his cup. "What if I could help you make your dream come true?" he unexpectedly offered. Monica raised an eyebrow, surprised by his directness. She laughed, but there was a sparkle in her eyes. You think I could manage that? Frank smiled back, and from that day on, their relationship developed rapidly. After just a few months, they were standing in a small church on the edge of town. Frank looked at his young wife, and his heart swelled with pride and joy. He gave her everything he could: expensive necklaces, designer dresses, and finally, a brand new shiny Tesla, which became their latest purchase. But happiness didn't last long. 6 months later, Frank noticed that Monica had begun to distance herself from him. Her cheerful laugh was heard less often, and she frequently went out on her errands, spending only a few hours at home. One evening, as Frank sat in his office, looking out the window at the empty road where her car usually stood, he started thinking. Monica had been saying far too often that the Tesla was breaking down. Another day at the car shop? He asked her one evening over dinner. Monica smiled nervously and shook her head. Yes. Problems with the coolant. I had to get everything replaced so it would run properly. Frank froze. Coolant? In an electric car? His mind, always sharp and analytical, immediately realized something was off. He didn't continue the conversation, but suspicions already took root in his mind. The next day, Frank went to an old acquaintance, Jack Marlowe, a private detective he had trusted for many years. Listen, Jack, Frank said as he entered the small office, I need you to follow my wife. I think she's hiding something from me. Jack nodded briefly, jotting down the details, and asked, Do you want the truth? Frank stood silently for a moment, looking out the window, then resolutely clasped his hands and said, I always choose the truth, Jack. A week later, Jack returned with news. You were right, Frank. Your wife isn't repairing her car. She's seeing a mechanic. They spend time together in his workshop while you think she's waiting for the car to be fixed. Frank nodded in silence. It hurt, but he wasn't going to show it. He was old, but not foolish. Frank returned home and began to act. That evening, when Monica came back, he met her at the door with a broad smile. How are you, darling? He asked gently. Monica, suddenly feeling a bit uneasy about his kindness, mumbled something, but Frank didn't give her time to think. I have a surprise for you, he announced. Let's go to your favorite restaurant and celebrate. Monica, of course, didn't object. Over dinner, Frank decided to strike where it would hurt the most. I've been thinking. You deserve more than just being my wife. You're young, beautiful, and I want to give you freedom. Freedom? She asked, not understanding what he meant. Yes, you've always wanted to be independent, right? To live life the way you want? I'm giving you the house and the car. You can live however you wish. Monica was stunned. She couldn't believe it would be that easy. Just a few weeks ago, she had been dreaming of this, and now her heart was racing with excitement. At last, she would be free. The next day, Frank really did leave, handing over the keys to the house and car to his wife. But what followed was something she hadn't expected. All the bank accounts were frozen, her credit cards were blocked, and the house suddenly turned out to be mortgaged. Monica lost everything. When she called her lover, the mechanic Joe, he met her with a dry tone. You're out of money? he asked mockingly. Then why would I need you? The blow was crushing. In desperation, she returned home, but there she was greeted by Frank's lawyer. Mrs. Robinson, my client left you some documents. You need to vacate the house by the end of the week. Completely defeated, Monica returned to where her story had begun, back to the same diner where she once again put on an apron and served coffee to new customers. As for Frank, a few months later, he married his housemaid, a quiet, caring woman who always looked at him with admiration. One day, driving past the diner, he caught a glimpse of Monica standing behind the counter. Their eyes met briefly, but she didn't say a word. He smiled to himself, satisfied that justice had been served. Jack and Emma first met during high school. Emma had just moved to a new neighborhood with her parents and enrolled in Jack's school. For Jack, it was love at first sight. A month later, they became good friends, and 3 months after that, they started dating. Emma had always dreamed of true love, and when she saw how deeply Jack cared for her, she reciprocated without holding back her emotions. Years passed, and after graduation, Jack left for college in a different city, but the distance didn't diminish their love. They stayed in touch, meeting during school breaks to spend time together. After college, both returned to their hometown and soon got married. Emma loved baking and always dreamed of opening her own bakery, which she did not far from their home. Her business thrived, and Jack continued working for a large marketing company. Life seemed perfect until tragedy struck. 3 years into their marriage, their newborn daughter, Grace, passed away from an illness just 4 months after she was born. Emma was devastated, sinking into a deep depression. Jack did everything he could to support her, but 2 months later, another disaster hit. Emma was involved in a terrible car accident that left her unable to walk. From that day forward, Jack took over all responsibilities at home and cared for Emma. He even quit his job to devote himself entirely to her care. Friends and family encouraged him to leave her, but he refused. One day, Jack's mother visited and expressed her concern. "Jack, I'm really worried about you. You're young, with your whole life ahead of you. Why don't you leave Emma and start over?" she suggested cautiously. Jack was shocked. "Mom, I can't believe you're saying this," he responded, shaken. "I love her, and I'll never abandon her." "You're wasting your life, son. If the roles were reversed, Emma would have left you by now," she persisted. "You're wrong," Jack replied calmly but firmly. "She would never do that. Please, don't interfere in my marriage." His mother dropped the subject, but Jack knew that many of his friends and relatives shared her view. He distanced himself from those who kept pushing the idea of leaving Emma. 25 years passed, and Jack continued caring for his wife every day. One morning, he noticed something strange. The kitchen, which he had left messy the night before, was spotless, and his clothes were washed and folded. Confused, he asked Emma if anyone had visited while he was asleep. "No, dear." "Why do you ask?" she replied. "I woke up to a clean kitchen and laundry done." "Did I do it last night?" he asked, unsure. "Yes, you did." "You must have forgotten," Emma lied. Jack didn't think much of it at first, assuming the stress had made him forget, but when it happened again, he grew suspicious. He decided to install hidden cameras in the house. A few days later, after returning home to yet another spotless kitchen, Jack checked the camera footage. What he saw melted his heart. Every morning, around 5 a.m., while Jack was still fast asleep, Emma would quietly get into her wheelchair and go around the house, cleaning and tidying up. That evening, Jack gently confronted her. "Emma, why didn't you tell me?" he asked softly. Emma looked down, her eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted to help, Jack. You do so much for me, and I hate that I can't do more," she confessed. Jack hugged her tightly. "You don't have to do anything, Emma. I'm here because I love you." That moment only strengthened their bond further. Jack and Emma's story proved that true love is about loyalty and dedication, especially through the hardest times. Despite everything, they stayed together, showing that real love isn't about grand gestures, but about standing by each other through life's storms. Love this story? Tap that like button and subscribe for more. Let us know how this story made you feel in one word in the comments. Don't forget to check out the next video. Michael, a 26-year-old artist who worked part-time as a gas station attendant, didn't expect that this day would change his life. It was an ordinary morning at the gas station. Working at pump number 1, he served customers and chatted with his colleagues. Everything was going as usual until a fancy motorcycle pulled up to his pump. The rider, an elderly woman in leather clothing and a helmet, looked striking, her silver hair peeking out from under the helmet. "Good morning, ma'am," Michael greeted her. "How much gas would you like?" The woman removed her helmet and replied with a smile. Michael began to fill her motorcycle when his gaze fell on a tattoo on her wrist. It was an image of half a heart and a cross, a rare tattoo that Michael had only seen on one person before. "Is everything all right, son?" the woman asked, noticing his astonishment. "Yes, it's just. That tattoo reminds me of someone," Michael said, nervously looking at her. "Her name was Emily." "What a coincidence," the woman responded with a smile. "My name is also Emily. Emily Smith." Michael froze in shock. Could this really be the same Emily who had looked after him and his sister when they were children? Michael couldn't believe his eyes. "Is it really you, Emily, who used to take care of me and my sister?" Emily smiled and got off her motorcycle, embracing Michael. "Look how much you've grown. I never thought I'd see you again," she said. "How are your parents? Is your mother still upset that I used to secretly give you sweets?" Michael laughed. "I think she's forgiven you by now. But my sister, Lily, passed away in a car accident." Emily's face darkened. "Oh, Michael, I'm so sorry." "It's all right. It happened a long time ago," he replied. Just as they started exchanging memories, 2 cars behind them honked impatiently. Emily quickly wrote down her number and address on a piece of paper and suggested that Michael visit her that evening. After work, Michael went home, freshened up, and called Emily to let her know he was coming. At 6:30 p.m., he stood at the door of her cozy house. The warm atmosphere reminded him of his childhood. "What can I offer you, dear?" Emily asked. "A glass of water will be enough," Michael replied. Emily returned with water and chocolates, knowing they were his favorite. "Do you still love chocolate?" she asked with a smile. Michael nodded, enjoying the moment. Once they settled down, Emily asked, "Did you pursue your dream of becoming an artist?" Michael shook his head. "My parents didn't support me, and I started saving money to study something more profitable." "Art doesn't pay the bills," he said. Emily sighed. "When I was young, like you, I dreamed of traveling, but my parents talked me out of it too. It's my biggest regret." "But you can still fulfill that dream," Michael exclaimed. "No, son, I'm too old." "But you shouldn't give up on your dreams. Don't let others' opinions destroy them," she said, looking at Michael with care. Emily unexpectedly offered, "I want to help you, Michael. I have savings, and I want you to use them to study." Michael was in shock, but Emily insisted. "None of this happened by accident. We met again for a reason," she said. And she kept her promise. With Emily's support, Michael was able to attend college and graduate with honors. His art career took off. Years passed. Michael became a successful artist, but one day Emily passed away, leaving a void in his life that could never be filled. She wasn't just a benefactor, she had been the mother he had never had. Michael continued to share her story, telling others how this woman had changed his life. When Michael's first daughter was born, he named her Emily Margaret, in honor of the woman who had given him faith in himself and helped him achieve his dream. I'll never forget that evening. Michael and I had just put the kids to bed and were about to watch a movie when the phone rang. The screen displayed my mother-in-law Margaret's name. "Hi, Mom," Emily answered. "What's happened?" I watched as my wife's face changed from mild surprise to shock and horror. "What? No, this can't be." Her voice trembled. "We'll come right now." Emily hung up and looked at me with glassy eyes. "Mom has cancer," she whispered. Stage 4. The world around us seemed to stop. Margaret had always been a strong woman, a true pillar of the family. The thought that she could be seriously ill seemed unreal. We quickly got dressed, called a babysitter for the kids, and drove to Margaret's house. The whole way, Emily was silent, tightly gripping my hand. Margaret met us at the door. She looked pale and exhausted, but was trying to smile. "Oh, dears," she said, hugging Emily. "I'm so sorry I had to give you such news." Emily broke down into tears. "How could this happen? You've always taken care of your health." I stood nearby, feeling awkward and not knowing what to say. Margaret had never been my favorite person. We often argued and disagreed, but now I felt only sympathy and a desire to help. Margaret turned to me. "Thank you for coming. I know we haven't always gotten along, but now I need the support of the whole family." I nodded, trying to find words. "Of course, Margaret. We're here for you." The next few hours passed as if in a fog. Margaret talked about her diagnosis, the upcoming treatment, and how she's afraid of becoming a burden to the family. "I don't want you to sacrifice your lives for me," she said, "but I'm scared to be alone." "Mom, don't even think about that." Emily hugged her tightly. "We'll be here, right, Michael?" I looked at these two women, so different and so similar at the same time. "Yes," I replied. We'll get through this together. We returned home well past midnight. Emily was exhausted and went straight to bed, and I sat in the kitchen trying to make sense of everything that had happened. Our family's life was about to change dramatically, but I was ready to support Emily and Margaret in this fight. If only I had known then what I was really getting into. 2 weeks had passed since that evening when Margaret told us her diagnosis. During this time, our life had completely turned upside down. Emily took leave from work to take care of her mother. I tried to spend more time with the kids so they wouldn't feel neglected. Margaret moved in with us. We cleared out the guest room for her, and now the house was filled with the smell of medicine and quiet conversations. But something was bothering me. I couldn't say exactly what, but some sixth sense told me that not everything was as it seemed. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and saw Margaret preparing breakfast. She was humming something to herself and looked too lively for someone with stage 4 cancer. "Good morning, Margaret," I said. "How are you feeling?" She turned around, and for a second, I thought I saw something guilty in her eyes. "Oh, Michael. Good morning. I'm a little better today, thank you." I nodded, pouring myself coffee. "Glad to hear it. What about chemotherapy? When do you start?" Margaret hesitated. "Oh, the doctor said we need to wait a bit longer, prepare the body and all that." Something in her voice sounded insincere. I decided to dig deeper. "Can I take a look at your medical documents? Maybe we should get a second opinion." Margaret turned sharply to me. "Why don't you believe me?" No, of course not." I tried to smooth over the situation. "I just want to make sure we're doing everything possible." Margaret relaxed a bit. "Of course, dear. I'll show you later, okay? Right now, they're somewhere in boxes after the move." I nodded and left the kitchen, feeling my suspicions grow. Something wasn't right here. Over the next few days, I started observing Margaret more closely. I noticed that she often forgot about her illness when she thought no one was watching. She could play with the grandchildren for hours, showing no signs of fatigue or pain. One evening, I accidentally overheard her talking on the phone. "Yes, Lisa, everything's going according to plan. Emily is taking such good care of me." No. No one suspects anything yet." I froze behind the door, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. Could my suspicions be justified? Could Margaret be lying about her illness? But why? And what should I do with this information? Now, I returned to Emily's in my bedroom, feeling a heaviness in my heart. My wife was sleeping, exhausted from taking care of her sick mother. How could I tell her about my suspicions without destroying her world? I lay down next to her, staring at the ceiling and realizing that I faced a difficult choice: reveal the truth and risk destroying the family, or stay silent and become complicit in this deception. One thing I knew for sure: I needed evidence, and I was ready to find it. I spent the next few days gathering information. I started small, asking Emily to show me Margaret's medical documents. My wife was surprised but agreed. "Here," she said, handing me a folder. "I just don't understand why you need this." I shrugged. "Just want to better understand the situation. Maybe I'll find some experimental therapy or something like that." Emily smiled, and tears glistened in her eyes. Thank you for caring so much about Mom." A pang of guilt hit me, but I pushed it away. I was doing this for our family. After examining the documents, I realized they looked suspiciously generic. No specific data, no doctor signatures. Everything was too vague. The next step was to follow Margaret. I started working from home to be able to observe her behavior. One day, when Emily had gone shopping and the kids were at school, I saw Margaret leaving the house. She looked around and quickly walked down the street. I decided to follow her. Margaret walked to a small cafe a couple of blocks from our house. There, a woman I had never seen before was waiting for her. I sat at the next table, pulling my baseball cap lower over my eyes, and listened to their conversation. "Lisa, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up," Margaret was saying. "Michael suspects something." "Don't be silly," replied the woman, who was apparently named Lisa. "You've held out this long. Think about how happy Emily is when you're around." I felt my blood run cold. There it was, the evidence I was looking for. Returning home, I was in turmoil. Now I knew for sure that Margaret was lying. But what should I do with this knowledge? I decided to try one more method. I called the hospital where Margaret was supposedly being treated, pretending to be her son. "Hello, I'd like to inquire about my mother's condition." "Margaret Thompson," I said. "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't have a patient by that name," the nurse replied. This was the final confirmation I needed. Margaret had indeed made it all up. That evening, when Emily was putting the kids to bed and Margaret was watching TV in the living room, I sat in my office trying to decide what to do next. On one hand, I couldn't allow this deception to continue. It was destroying our family from the inside, making everyone live in constant stress and fear. On the other hand, I understood why Margaret had taken this step. She was lonely, felt she was losing connection with her daughter and grandchildren. This lie had brought her back the family's attention and care. I looked at the family photo on my desk, happy faces of Emily, the kids, even Margaret. Could I destroy this happiness, even if it was built on a lie? But then I thought about how exhausted Emily was, how she worried, how the kids were afraid of losing their grandmother. Was it fair to make them go through this? I realized I was facing the most difficult choice of my life, and whatever I decided, the consequences would be serious. A week had passed since I learned the truth about Margaret's deception. This week was like walking through a minefield. Every time Margaret complained about her condition, every time Emily looked at her mother with concern, I felt everything inside me tighten from the need to keep this secret. One morning, as Emily and I were having breakfast in the kitchen, she suddenly said, "You know, Michael, I'm so grateful for everything you're doing for Mom. You've become a real son to her." I nearly choked on my coffee. A sense of guilt overwhelmed me. "Emily, listen," I began, but then Margaret entered the kitchen. "Good morning, dear," she said, smiling weakly. "Oh, I'm not feeling well today." I saw Emily immediately jump up to help her mother. "Mom, maybe you should lie down. I'll bring your medicine." I watched this scene, feeling everything boiling inside me. Margaret's lie was not only manipulating Emily's feelings, but also exhausting her physically and emotionally. "Margaret," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "maybe we should go to the doctor to check if everything's all right." Margaret shot me a quick glance in which I saw a flicker of worry. No, no, dear. It's just a common malaise. It'll pass. But Emily interjected, Michael's right. Better to check. I can drive you right now. I saw Margaret start to panic. She clearly hadn't expected this turn of events. No need to worry, honey. I'll make an appointment myself. Okay, Emily frowned, but Margaret responded, Emily, I put my hand on my wife's shoulder. Let's give Mom some time. If she gets worse, we'll definitely go to the doctor, right? Margaret nodded with relief. Of course, Michael. Thank you for understanding. When Emily left the kitchen, I looked straight into Margaret's eyes. We need to talk, I said quietly. That night, after Emily put the kids to bed, Margaret nodded silently, and I saw fear in her eyes. She understood that I knew her secret. All day, I was on pins and needles. I tried to work, but my thoughts kept returning to the upcoming conversation. How should I proceed? Give Margaret a chance to confess everything herself or directly accuse her of lying? That evening, when the house quieted down, I went down to the living room. Margaret was already waiting for me there, nervously fidgeting with the edge of her sweater. Michael, wait, I interrupted her. Before you say anything, I want you to know I know everything. I know you lied about your illness. Margaret lowered her head, and her shoulders shook with sobs. I didn't mean to. I felt so lonely, so useless. I sat down next to her, feeling a strange mixture of anger and sympathy. Margaret, do you understand what you've done? You've made the whole family go through hell. Emily is exhausted, the kids are scared, and all this because of a lie. She raised her tear-filled eyes to me. I know I did a terrible thing, but when I saw how everyone rallied around me, how Emily started spending more time with me, I couldn't stop. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. What are you going to do now? Margaret shook her head. I don't know. I can't lose Emily and the grandchildren, but I can't continue this lie either. I looked at this broken woman and realized I was facing the most difficult choice of my life: expose Margaret and possibly destroy our family, or give her a chance to fix the situation herself. You have 2 days, I finally said. 2 days to decide how you're going to get out of this situation. If you don't tell Emily the truth in 2 days, I will. Margaret nodded, wiping away tears. Thank you, Michael. I'll try to fix everything. I stood up and headed for the door, but stopped at the exit. Margaret, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for Emily and our children. With these words, I left, leaving Margaret alone with her thoughts and sense of guilt. 2 days passed as if in a fog. I observed Margaret, trying to understand if she was preparing for a confession or looking for a way to continue her deception. She was quieter than usual, often sitting alone in her room, supposedly resting. Emily noticed the change in her mother's behavior and started worrying even more. Michael, I think Mom is getting worse, she said to me on the evening of the second day. Maybe we should insist on hospitalization. I felt a lump forming in my throat. Time was running out, and Margaret still hadn't decided to confess. Let's wait until tomorrow, I replied, knowing that tomorrow everything would change one way or another. If she doesn't get better, We'll definitely go to the hospital." Emily nodded, hugging me. "Thank you for being here. I don't know how I would have coped without you." Her words were like a knife to my heart. I felt like a traitor, hiding the truth from my wife. On the morning of the third day, I woke up with a heavy heart. Today, everything was supposed to be resolved. Going down to the kitchen, I saw Margaret sitting at the table with a cup of tea. She looked exhausted, as if she hadn't slept all night. "Good morning, Michael," she said quietly. "Good morning, Margaret," I replied, pouring myself coffee. "Have you made a decision?" She took a deep breath. I can't do it, Michael. I can't lose Emily and the grandchildren. They're all I have." I felt everything inside me tighten with disappointment and anger. "So you prefer to continue torturing them with this lie? Margaret, do you understand what you're doing? What else can I do?" Her voice sounded desperate. "If I confess, they'll hate me. I'll be left all alone." I looked at this broken woman and realized that now the choice was entirely up to me. I could expose her lie right now, put an end to this deception, or I could remain silent and become complicit in this cruel game. On one hand, the truth could destroy our family. Emily would be devastated to learn of her mother's deception. The children could lose trust in their grandmother. Margaret herself would probably be banished from the family, left in complete loneliness. On the other hand, continuing the lie was slowly eating us from the inside. Emily was exhausting herself, taking care of her sick mother. The children were living in constant fear of losing their grandmother. How long could this go on? A month? A year? How long could we live in this illusion? I stood in the kitchen, looking at Margaret, and felt the weight of this decision on my shoulders. My grandmother was returning to Boston from her brother in Florida. On the plane, my grandmother had taken out a novel and was preparing to use the time on the flight for some pleasant reading. One of the last people to enter the cabin was a slender blonde woman about her age. She turned out to be Grandma's neighbor. The woman looked very upset. Her eyes were crying. My grandmother greeted her and asked if she was okay. The woman nodded and did not engage in conversation. My grandmother tried to immerse herself in reading and decided that her travel companion had no desire to communicate. After takeoff, the woman began to cry softly. My grandmother was alarmed by her companion's condition, and after half an hour, she decided to ask a second time what happened to this woman and if she needed help. "Honey, what happened to you? Did one of your relatives die?" This time the woman continued the conversation. She introduced herself as Elizabeth and continued sobbing. "Everything is fine. Everyone is alive." "Well, since no one has died, what is going on? Is there anything I can do to help?" said the grandmother. "No, there's nothing I can do. Except soap and rope. My son-in-law is divorcing my daughter," Elizabeth finally said. And the traveling companion told my grandmother this story. By the time of the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles, Elizabeth was married to her red-headed classmate Tim. They loved each other, and Tim supported her dream of volunteering at the Olympics. Elizabeth worked with a team from Ethiopia. She spent most of her time with the athletes, and one day they went to a bar to celebrate one of the athletes' successes. And somehow, a mutual passion flared up with one of the athletes. On that fateful evening, Elizabeth cheated on her husband. The woman regretted giving in to passion. Until the end of the Olympics, she avoided seeing the athlete. The teams went home and the Olympics were over. And then Elizabeth realized she was pregnant, and it was definitely not Tim's. Her husband, upon finding out she was pregnant, was very happy and looked forward to the birth of their firstborn. He dreamed of how happy they would be, how he would teach the baby to ride a bike, go camping, and open Christmas presents together. Elizabeth realized that she needed to tell her husband everything. She was afraid that she would disappoint Tim, that he would leave her, that all of her acquaintances would find out about her infidelity. The woman realized that the child would be born a mulatto and her adultery would become obvious. But Elizabeth did not dare to have a frank conversation with Tim. In the end, she decided that she would tell him when the baby was born. In the meantime, she would enjoy the loving care of her husband. In 1985, a little girl was born. Blonde, just like her mother. And Elizabeth didn't dare tell Tim about her infidelity. Her husband adored his daughter and spent a lot of time with her. Elizabeth knew in her heart that Tim couldn't be the girl's father. But they were so happy together, and she was afraid to ruin everything. The girl grew up and pleased her parents with her achievements. Gradually, Elizabeth stopped thinking about her lies. The daughter finished school and college. She married a nice man from an Irish family, Jack O'Neill. Tim was able to lead his adored daughter to the altar and died suddenly of a heart condition. Daughter and son-in-law, living soul to soul, working good jobs. They mortgaged a small house in the suburbs of Boston and dreamed of having a big family. The daughter became pregnant. When the young family told Elizabeth she would soon be a grandmother, she was overjoyed. After Tim's death, Elizabeth felt very lonely. And she was happy to fill that void with the love of her grandson. Her daughter gave birth, but her grandson was born dark-skinned, but with eyes as blue as his father's. And the son-in-law, when he saw the child, immediately asked for a divorce. Tears, screams, hysteria. The daughter swore to her husband that she had not betrayed him. The son-in-law wanted to believe it, but then he looked at the handsome mulatto and realized that it was not possible. Daughter Elizabeth convinced her husband to take a fatherhood test, which, to the young father's surprise, showed 999% that Jack was the baby's father. Anyway, Elizabeth flew to Boston to tell her daughter and son-in-law about her infidelity years ago. Elizabeth was very ashamed that she had lied to her beloved Tim for so many years, and had almost ruined the lives of her daughter and little grandson with her lies. Hello, friends. In today's video, we're going to discuss a very popular and even mysterious topic. Why do women sometimes say one thing but mean something completely different? If you've ever found yourself in a situation where you didn't quite understand what a woman really meant, this video is for you. Let's start with the fact that communication isn't just about words. Women tend to use a more layered approach to communication. Studies show that women are more likely to rely on emotions and context rather than just facts. This means that behind their words, there can be deeper feelings and desires. For example, when a woman says, "I'm fine," it could actually mean that something is bothering her, but she's not ready to talk about it directly. It's important to understand that many women are raised in a culture where emotional intuition and the ability to read nonverbal cues are highly valued. This could be related to a desire to avoid conflict or the expectation that their partner will figure out the problem on their own. So, if you hear one thing but feel something else, it's not always manipulation sometimes. It's a way of maintaining emotional harmony in the conversation. Nonverbal signals. Often, a woman may convey her true mood through nonverbal signals, tone of voice, facial expressions, or body language. Being able to read these signals can help you understand each other better. For example, if she says yes but crosses her arms and looks away, it might mean that she's not fully agreeing with you. The most important thing is not to respond with irritation or confusion, but to create space for an honest conversation. Ask questions like, "Are you sure everything is okay? I feel like something's bothering you." This shows that you care about her feelings and are ready to listen. Remember, women appreciate attention to detail and emotional sensitivity. So now we understand that when women say one thing but mean another, it's not always an attempt to confuse or complicate communication. It's often the result of complex emotional communication. Next time you find yourself in such a situation, try asking more questions to get to the true feelings behind the words. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more interesting topics. Today we're diving into one of the most baffling cases of recent years, the disappearance of Eleanor Price. Eleanor vanished on Mother's Day, May 10, 2020, from her picturesque home near Oak Creek, Colorado. For years, her family and friends were left without answers, clinging to fading hopes. Then, on October 22, 2023, Eleanor's remains were finally uncovered, buried in the remote wilderness of Golden Valley, over 50 miles from her family's search area. This discovery opened new avenues in the investigation, casting doubt on the initial theories and revealing the tangled web of Eleanor's life and relationships. Eleanor Price was born on January 12, 1973, in the small town of Silver Woods, Indiana. The youngest of 3 siblings, she was known for her gentle demeanor, kindness, and sharp intellect. After high school, Eleanor pursued a degree in education at Colorado University, where she met Anthony Blake, a charismatic baseball player with dreams of going professional. Their romance blossomed, and after a 6-year courtship, they married and settled down in Indiana. Anthony's baseball career was cut short due to a severe shoulder injury, but he soon found a new passion in landscaping. Eleanor began teaching elementary school, and together, they built a life filled with community, family, and warmth. They had 2 daughters, Marissa and Mia, who brought them endless joy. Their life appeared idyllic to the outside world, but trouble started when Eleanor was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. She fought it valiantly and survived 2 grueling battles with cancer. After her second remission in 2018, the Blakes made a big decision. They would move to Colorado, where Anthony had accepted a new job, and Marissa could attend Western State University nearby. They bought a beautiful 7-acre property in Oak Maple, hoping to start fresh. Anthony quickly adapted to Colorado life, finding new work as a contractor and even volunteering as a firefighter. Eleanor retired from teaching and devoted herself to local causes, her church, and a new love for mountain biking. But beneath the picture-perfect life lay tension, some of which would only come to light after her disappearance. On May 10, 2020, Mother's Day started differently for the Blakes. Anthony was away on a landscaping job in Ridgeville, 3 hours from their home. Their daughters, meanwhile, were on a camping trip, leaving Eleanor alone. That evening, Marissa and Mia tried reaching their mother to wish her a happy Mother's Day, but Eleanor didn't respond, a strange occurrence, given her frequent social media posts. Concerned, the girls asked a family friend, Joanne Miller, to check in on her. When Joanne arrived, the house was empty, with no signs of Eleanor. She called Anthony, who told her to check if Eleanor's mountain bike was there. When Joanne reported it missing, he advised her to call the police, sparking an investigation that would turn into a 3-year search. The initial clue, Eleanor's mountain bike, was found near a ravine not far from the Blake property. Oddly, it showed no signs of damage. The bike was fully intact, the vegetation around it undisturbed, and there were no skid marks. To investigators, it appeared as though the bike had been staged rather than crashed. Anthony's explanation was strange and unexpected. He suggested a mountain lion might have attacked his wife. Friends and neighbors found this explanation strange, and as time went on, Anthony's stories grew more inconsistent. As the investigation progressed, authorities unearthed unusual details about the day Eleanor went missing. Surveillance footage showed Anthony stopping at several locations and discarding items in various dumpsters along his route. Additionally, data from Anthony's vehicle indicated erratic movements around the property early that morning, contradicting his claim that he'd left for Ridgeville right away. When questioned, he said he had briefly left the property to track elk at dawn, an explanation investigators found difficult to believe. Adding to the suspicion was the discovery of a tranquilizer dart cap in the family's dryer and a strong bleach odor in Anthony's hotel room. But perhaps the most disturbing findings came from Eleanor's own phone records. As detectives examined her messages and notes, they discovered that she had been deeply unhappy in her marriage. She had confided in friends about her fear of Anthony's temper, and her private notes detailed escalating arguments and controlling behavior. Eleanor had also been involved in a long-distance relationship with her high school friend, Jack Taylor, which had started in 2018. While Jack was quickly ruled out as a suspect, the affair complicated the investigation, leading many to suspect that Anthony had discovered the relationship and acted out of jealousy. In May 2021, nearly a year after Eleanor's disappearance, Anthony was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors presented a case that painted Anthony as a jealous husband who had premeditated his wife's death. The charges were based on a range of circumstantial evidence, from the tranquilizer cap to the telematic data from his vehicle. But Anthony's defense team challenged the prosecution's theory, arguing that the evidence was far from conclusive. The case took a significant twist when it was revealed that DNA found on Eleanor's bike helmet didn't match Anthony's. Instead, it matched an unknown individual linked to other unsolved crimes across the country. Then, 3 years after Eleanor disappeared, her remains were found. Investigators uncovered a shallow grave in the remote, rugged terrain of Ridge Valley. Anthony's attorney claimed this new evidence pointed to a serial offender and argued that Eleanor was likely one of many victims. The district attorney's office acknowledged the possibility, but has yet to remove Anthony as a suspect. Today, Anthony is free and has filed a lawsuit against the prosecutors, claiming wrongful arrest and damage to his reputation. The Price family, meanwhile, still waits for answers. Eleanor's case reminds us that the truth, like the mountains of Colorado, can be both hidden and formidable. And so, the shadows of Oak Maple remain long, and the mystery of Eleanor Price's disappearance endures. They say life can change in a second. Mine changed in 8 seconds. That's how long it took from the moment the truck swerved into the oncoming lane until I regained consciousness in the overturned vehicle. Multiple fractures. The doctor said it would require lengthy rehabilitation, at least 6 months of bed rest. Laura, my wife, stayed brave. "We'll manage, honey. I'll take extra shifts at the clinic," she said. But we both knew my insurance wouldn't cover enough. Medical bills were piling up like a snowball. I called for help. "Margaret, my mother-in-law, I'll take care of Ethan while Laura's at work." "Mom, are you sure?" she replied. "It's difficult. I'm a retired nurse, remember?" "This isn't my first time," she assured her. So Margaret became my caregiver at 50. She had retained not only her professional skills, but also a remarkable grace. Her touches were confident and gentle at the same time. "We need to turn you on the other side," she would say to prevent bed sores. At first, I was terribly embarrassed, especially during intimate procedures, but Margaret remained professional. "Come on, Ethan. I've been in medicine for 20 years. For me, a body is just a body." Laura would leave early and return late. Sometimes I heard her crying in the bathroom. "She's strong," Margaret would say while wiping my back. "But it's hard for her. I feel like a burden." "You'll get better." Her hands glided across my skin, professionally massaging the muscles, but sometimes it seemed her touches lasted longer than necessary. "Does it hurt?" she would ask while massaging a particularly tense area. "No, not at all." In such moments, a strange tension would hang between us. She would look away, and I would pretend to be dozing. One evening, Laura called. "Sorry, honey. I'll be late again. Emergency surgery." "It's okay. Margaret's with me." I'm so grateful to Mom. I don't know what we would do without her. I didn't know either, but with each passing day, I felt Margaret's presence becoming something more than just help. "Do you want a sleeping pill?" she asked, adjusting my pillow. "No, let's just talk." She sat down beside me in the twilight. Her profile seemed especially sharp against the fading light. Days merged into an endless succession of procedures, conversations, and touches. Margaret spent more and more time with me. "Tell me about yourself," I asked. "About your youth, about how you met Laura's father." "Why do you want to know?" she replied. She would sit in the chair by the bed, crossing one leg over the other. Her house dress would rise slightly, revealing her knees. "I was like Laura," she said. "Just as determined. Nursing was everything. And then I met Thomas and fell in love, more like gave in to passion. You know that feeling when your mind says no, but your body—" She stopped short, meeting my gaze. "But your body." My voice grew husky. "Never mind. Let's do your exercises." Physical therapy was becoming increasingly torturous, not from pain, but from her touches. "We need to work the muscles," she would say, massaging my legs. "Otherwise, they'll atrophy." Her fingers slid up my thigh. I held my breath. "Does it hurt?" "No, Margaret." She paused for a moment, then pulled away. "That's enough for today." At night, I couldn't sleep. Her image haunted me. The curve of her neck, the scent of her hair, her casual touches. "You're not sleeping well," she noticed. "In the morning, maybe take a sleeping pill after all." "No, just thoughts about what?" "I know what." She turned to the window. "No, Ethan. It's wrong." "And what's right?" "Pretending nothing is happening." But we both knew that was a lie. Something was happening, something dangerous and inevitable. Laura called less and less frequently. Work consumed her completely. She was wearing herself out. "Margaret," I said, when she's helping me with dinner, "I'm worried about her." "What about yourself?" "About what's happening between us." I stopped, but her hands trembled as she wiped my lips with a napkin. One day, during a massage, our eyes met. She leaned too close. I could feel her breath on my face. "Be quiet," she whispered. "Just be quiet." It happened on a rainy Tuesday. Laura was on night duty. Margaret was giving me a massage. "Turn onto your back," her voice trembled. Her hands glided across my chest, lingering longer than necessary. The room was hot despite the working air conditioner. So I caught her hand. She whispered, "Don't." But she didn't pull away. "Look at me," she said. She raised her eyes, reflecting the same madness that was burning me from within. "We shouldn't," her lips trembled. "I know, but we couldn't stop anymore." Her lips found mine. Hands tangled in hair. The scent of her perfume made my head spin. Rain drummed against the windows, drowning out our voices. She smelled of jasmine. My fingers trembled touching her silk dress. Each touch made my heart beat faster. She pressed closer, whispering my name. The pain in my joints receded, replaced by something stronger. The world narrowed to this room, to just the two of us, to the sound of rain outside. Afterward, we lay in silence. The rain wouldn't stop. "What have we done?" she whispered. "What we wanted to," I answered. "Don't talk about her," she said. "Not now." She stood up, adjusting her dress. "This was a mistake." "Do you really think so?" "No." She turned to the window. "And that's the scariest part." The phone shattered the silence. "Laura, hi honey. How are you?" "Fine." I tried to speak calmly. "Is Mom there?" "Yes, I'm here." Margaret took the phone. Her voice didn't waver. "Everything's fine, dear. He's almost asleep." "Thanks, Mom. You're an angel." Margaret turned off the phone. We looked at each other. "We're monsters," she said. "I know. This can't happen again." But we both knew it would, again and again. The following weeks turned into a dangerous dance on the edge of an abyss. Every time Laura left for work, we lost control. "This is madness," Margaret whispered, kissing me. "We've gone crazy." I couldn't disagree, but stopping was beyond our power. During the day, she remained a professional caregiver, measuring blood pressure, giving injections, helping with exercises. But her touches burned even through latex gloves. "Your recovery is going well," she would say in front of Laura. "You'll be walking soon." "It's all thanks to you, Mom," Laura would smile. "You take such good care of him," Laura would add. If only she knew how. At night, when Laura was on duty, Margaret would come to me. Moonlight silvered her graying hair, and time seemed to stop. "We must stop," she would say each time. "Each time we must." I would agree, pulling her closer. During the day, we were tormented by conscience, at night by passion. "You know what's worst?" she asked once. "What's worst?" "I don't feel guilty, only fear. Fear of this not ending, that I won't be able to live without you." I understood her. With each day, our obsession with each other grew stronger. Laura began to suspect something. "A woman's intuition," she said. "Mom's so different. She seems younger, really. And you're different too, more alive." I stayed silent. One day, Laura came home early. We barely managed to spring apart. "What happened?" she asked, seeing our flushed faces, his temperatures up. Margaret said quickly, "I was just checking it." "Should we call a doctor?" "No," we answered simultaneously. Laura gave us a strange look. "What's going on with you?" "Nothing." Margaret adjusted her robe. "Just tired." That night, she didn't come. I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Laura breathed quietly beside me. The phone vibrated softly. A message from Margaret. "We must stop before it's too late." "It's already too late," I replied. "Ethan, you have a letter." Laura handed me the envelope from the rehabilitation center. I took it with trembling hands. Margaret froze by the window. "They're ready to take you in a month." "Laura," she beamed. "Isn't that wonderful?" "Yes, wonderful, Mom." "Did you hear? Ethan will be able to walk." "Great news." Margaret's voice sounded hollow. Rehabilitation meant the end of our meetings, our madness. Later, when Laura left for work, Margaret burst into the room. "We can't continue like this." "I know." "No, you don't understand. I'm going crazy. Can't sleep, can't eat. All I think about is you. And I think about you. This is destroying us." She was right. We were losing weight, not sleeping, living as if in a fever. "What should we do?" I asked. "Run. Leave somewhere far away. Start over." "What about Laura? What about our life?" She was almost shouting. "I love my daughter, but I love you too." For the first time, these words were spoken aloud. "Ethan, don't say anything. Just think about it." That evening, Laura returned. "Troubled?" "Mom's been acting strange lately. Haven't you noticed?" "No." "And she's gathering her documents, renewing her passport. I thought maybe she's planning to travel." I suggested maybe. Laura pondered. "You know, she never really recovered after the divorce from my father. Always searching for something and not finding it, or finding the wrong thing." She looked at me intently. "Ethan, do you know something?" "No." What makes you think that? I don't know. I just feel like something's happening. That night, Margaret came for the last time. Her kisses were salty with tears. I bought tickets, she whispered, to Spain next week. Ethan, decide. Either everything or nothing. For 3 days, I didn't sleep, torn between duty and madness. Margaret didn't come, saying she was sick. Should we visit Mom? Laura suggested. No, I answered too quickly. I mean, let her rest. The night before Margaret's departure, I made my decision. Sent her a message. Come over. I need to tell you in person. She came in the morning after Laura had left. Her eyes were feverishly bright. I can't. She sat down, as if her legs couldn't hold her. Why? Because it will kill Laura. Because it's madness. I'm already dead without you. No, listen. She grabbed my hand. I've never felt anything like this, even in my youth. It's like a fire. Either we burn together or we extinguish the fire before everything burns down. Ethan, she recoiled, you're just afraid to be happy. I'm afraid of making everyone I love unhappy. And do you love me? I was silent. She laughed bitterly. I see. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry for believing that we could. The front door slammed. Laura stood in the doorway. Mom, aren't you sick? We froze. A terrible silence fell. What's going on here? Laura looked from me to her mother. Nothing. Margaret stood up. What? Steel rang in Laura's voice. Why do you both look like you've seen ghosts? Laura, I started to speak, but she raised her hand. I'm not blind. I saw everything all these months. Sweetheart, Margaret stepped toward her. Don't dare call me sweetheart. You both of you. She burst into tears. I'm leaving, Margaret said quietly, forever without him. Laura laughed bitterly. Yes, he chose you, and you chose betrayal. Margaret left without looking back. Laura and I were left alone. Why? She asked. I don't know. Do you love her? No. And I'm not sure I can live with this. She left too, and I remained alone in an empty house with an empty heart, destroyed by my own hands. A week later, a postcard came from Spain. No signature, just a phrase, sometimes the right choice is the wrong choice. John and Margaret had always shared a passion for health and fitness, making them a well-matched pair in every way. With his athletic build and her dedication to staying in shape, they were often the envy of their friends and neighbors. Together, they faced every challenge life threw at them with unwavering determination. But recently, life had taken an unexpected turn. John, who had been successful in his field for years, lost his job. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, with no luck finding work in his area of expertise. His confidence began to waver, and Margaret could sense the frustration building behind his calm demeanor. One evening, after what felt like yet another endless day of job searching, John returned home. Margaret greeted him with her usual bright smile, but tonight John's expression was different, hopeful yet cautious. I have some news, he began, taking her hands in his. I finally got an offer. Margaret's eyes lit up instantly. That's amazing, John. Tell me everything. He hesitated for a moment before continuing. It's a good job with decent pay, but there's a catch. I'd have to work at night. Margaret's smile softened. She knew how challenging this would be for them, with their usual routine and active lifestyle. But she also understood how much he needed this change. Night shifts might be tough, but if it's what you need, we'll make it work, she said, her voice filled with encouragement. John felt a surge of relief. He knew he could count on Margaret's support, no matter what lay ahead. Margaret's eyes sparkled with mischief as she replied, "Well, that's perfect. You'll be home during the day, so you can look after our daughter while I'm at work." She laughed, giving him a playful nudge. Margaret worked as a successful manager in the sales department of a thriving company. Her team was nearly all women, and she was highly valued by her colleagues and supervisors alike. Her hard work and dedication had earned her respect and a generous salary, allowing her to help support their family comfortably while John looked for his footing again. 2 months had passed, and life seemed to be settling into a comfortable rhythm. John's night shifts were paying well, and the strain of his previous job loss began to fade. Margaret was proud of how they'd adjusted, each supporting the family in their own way. Their daughter spent most evenings with her grandmother, allowing John and Margaret to focus on their work without worry. One evening, as Margaret was wrapping up at the office, her colleague suggested a night out at a popular club in town. It had been ages since she'd let herself relax outside of work and family, and the idea was tempting. After a moment's thought, she smiled and agreed. She reasoned that John would be busy with his night shift, and their daughter was happily settled at her grandmother's house for the evening. It was the perfect chance to unwind and enjoy a carefree night with friends. Margaret and her colleagues were enjoying themselves at the club, laughing and sharing stories over drinks. It had been a while since Margaret let loose, and the atmosphere felt like a refreshing escape from her usual routine. After a while, she excused herself to go to the restroom. But as she returned, she noticed the club's atmosphere had shifted. All eyes were on the stage, where a man had begun a mesmerizing dance. At first, Margaret laughed along with her friends, but as she focused on the dancer, her smile faded. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the man on stage. It was John. She froze, unable to process what she was seeing. Her husband, the man who had told her he was working night shifts, was now dancing on stage, surrounded by an adoring crowd. Before she could fully register her shock, one of her colleagues leaned in, noticing Margaret's stunned expression. "Margaret," her friend said, grinning, "that handsome guy started working here 2 months ago. He's become quite popular, especially with the ladies." Margaret stared in disbelief as her friend continued casually, "He's not just a dancer. For the right price, he'll spend the night with you. I actually tried his services recently. He's absolutely amazing." Margaret's world spun as her friend's words sank in, leaving her reeling with a mix of shock, confusion, and betrayal. Margaret left the club in a daze, her mind racing with everything she'd just discovered. She barely registered the bustling streets as she made her way home, her heart pounding with a mixture of disbelief and anger. The quiet of their home felt surreal, a stark contrast to the chaos of her thoughts. She settled onto the couch, her eyes fixed on the clock, watching the minutes tick by as she waited for John to return. A storm of questions filled her mind, but she knew one thing: tonight, she would finally get the answers she needed. When John finally walked through the door, Margaret was waiting, her expression resolute yet filled with hurt. "John," she began, trying to keep her voice steady, "I know what you've been doing at night. I went to the club tonight with my colleagues. I saw you." She paused, watching his reaction. "And I heard everything from the other women." John's face paled, and he ran a hand through his hair. "Margaret, let me explain." She interrupted, her voice breaking. "You've been working there for months, and you never told me. The dancing. And the other things?" She swallowed hard, searching his face for an answer. "Why, John?" He stepped closer, reaching for her hands. "Margaret, I did this because I had to. I was desperate. Losing my job. It made me feel helpless. I needed to do something to support us." Margaret pulled her hands back, still wrestling with her emotions. "But to do this? And those women, John, they don't see you as just a dancer. They pay you to. She struggled with the words, the hurt evident in her eyes. "To me, it's just a job," John said firmly. "It's work, Margaret. I never wanted you to find out like this, but I love only you. My heart belongs you and our daughter. It's nothing more than a way to make money." Margaret's expression softened as she heard the sincerity in his voice. "So, it doesn't mean anything to you?" she asked quietly. He shook his head, holding her gaze. "Not a thing. Every night, I'm just counting down the hours until I can come back home to you." She took a deep breath, feeling the tension slowly ease. "All right," she whispered, "I believe you. Just no more secrets, John." John nodded, relief filling his face. "I promise, Margaret. No more secrets." 6 months had passed since that difficult night, and things had begun to settle down for John and Margaret. True to his word, John left his night job behind and started fresh as a fitness trainer at a local gym. It was work he enjoyed, using his passion for fitness to help others reach their goals. However, some of his former clients from the club soon found him at the gym, hoping to continue their old arrangements. Each time, John politely but firmly set the boundaries. "I'm only a fitness trainer now," he would say with a reassuring smile. "Nothing more." He stayed focused on his work and his family, determined to rebuild the trust he had nearly lost. For Margaret, seeing him handle these situations with integrity only strengthened her belief in their future together. These titles use strong emotional triggers and hints of mystery and drama to entice viewers to click and watch your story. "You know, I always thought I was pretty lucky with my mother-in-law, Evelyn Bennett. Evelyn is a true pillar of society in our small town of Mapleton, Indiana. She's the chair of the parent committee at the local school, a church volunteer, and a loving grandmother to my children. Hell, she even bakes cookies for the homeless every Sunday. Don't forget, we have a charity dinner at the church on Saturday, my wife, Emily, reminded me at breakfast." Yes, I remember," I mumbled, buried in the morning newspaper. Is your mom going to be the star of the show again? Emily laughed. Well, who else? You know Mom. She can't sit still if help is needed somewhere. I nodded, remembering how last week Evelyn organized a fundraiser for a children's hospice. This woman seemed to be everywhere. By the way, she asked you to stop by her place after work today, something about her computer. No problem, I replied, finishing my coffee. Tell her I'll be there around 6. The workday flew by, and soon I was parking in front of Evelyn's neat 2-story house. After ringing the doorbell and getting no answer, I used the spare key she had given us just in case. Evelyn, it's Michael. I came to look at your computer. Silence. Strange. She's usually always home at this time. I went upstairs to her office. The door was ajar, and I could hear a muffled voice. Evelyn, I understand. I'll bring the money tonight. As usual, I heard her voice, but it was unusually tense. No, nobody knows. I'm not an idiot, I froze, not knowing whether to announce my presence or wait for her to finish the conversation. Listen, Mike, I need more time. I can't just come up with 50 grand right away. Her voice took on notes of irritation. I don't give a damn about your problems. I'm in hot water too. If Tony finds out that I suddenly... She fell silent. I heard footsteps and barely managed to step back from the door as it swung open. Evelyn stared at me, her face pale. Have you been here long? I tried to maintain a calm demeanor. I just arrived. Sorry for coming in without knocking. The door was open. Evelyn stared at me for several seconds, then her face relaxed, and she smiled her usual warm smile. Oh, Michael, you scared me. Come in, dear. What's wrong with my computer? I entered the office, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. What the hell had I just overheard? And what was I supposed to do with this information? The next few days were a blur. Evelyn's words wouldn't leave my head. 50 grand, Tony Russo, hot water. This didn't sound like the vocabulary of a parent committee chair. Michael, are you listening to me? Emily's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. Huh? Yes, of course, I lied, realizing I had missed half of her monologue about the upcoming charity dinner. What's wrong with you lately? You seem distracted. Emily frowned, looking at me with concern. I'm just tired. Lots of work. But in reality, I couldn't stop thinking about Evelyn. What if all this time her image of the perfect mother-in-law was just a mask? What if something dark and dangerous was hiding behind the facade of respectability? I decided to conduct my own investigation. I started small, listening more carefully to Evelyn's conversations, observing her behavior. But she acted as usual, baking cookies for the church fair, babysitting the grandchildren, discussing the latest town gossip with Emily. Mom, could you watch the kids on Friday evening? Sarah asked me and Michael want to go to the movies. Oh, darling, I'm so sorry, but I already promised to help at the animal shelter, Evelyn replied with sincere regret in her voice. Maybe Saturday, I thought, watching her closely, trying to catch even a hint of a lie. But nothing. Either she was really going to the shelter, or she was a damn good actress. One evening, When Emily was at a friend's house, I decided to take a desperate step. Waiting for Evelyn to leave her volunteering, I sneaked into her house. I felt like the worst scoundrel rummaging through my mother-in-law's things, but the thirst for truth was stronger. In her office, I found several strange notes with numbers and names, but nothing concrete. Just as I was about to leave, I accidentally knocked over a stack of papers on the desk. Among the fallen documents, something familiar caught my eye. It was a photograph. In it, Evelyn stood arm in arm with a man. They were smiling, but there was something predatory about that smile. Behind them, a casino building was visible. I turned the photo over. On the back was written, Vegas 2019, big score with Tony Russo. Tony Russo, the same name from the phone conversation. Suddenly, I heard the sound of the front door opening. Damn, Evelyn had returned earlier than expected. In a panic, I stuffed the photo in my pocket and rushed to the back door. At home, lying awake next to the peacefully snoring Emily, I stared at the ceiling and thought, what have you gotten yourself into, Evelyn? And what am I supposed to do with all this? Now, the following weeks turned into a real detective thriller for me. I started tracking Evelyn, recording her conversations, noting oddities in her behavior. Hell, I even installed a location tracking app on her phone under the pretext of caring for her safety. Michael, don't you find that Mom has been a bit tense lately? Emily asked me one evening over dinner. I nearly choked on a piece of chicken. Really? I tried to maintain composure. I haven't noticed. No, look. She seems the same, Emily pondered, searching for words as if something was troubling her. If you only knew. I thought, but I do. Maybe she's just tired. You know she's always busy, Emily nodded, but I could see she wasn't entirely convinced. Meanwhile, my investigation was gaining momentum. I found out that Evelyn regularly traveled to a neighboring town, supposedly to participate in charity events. But when I checked, there were no events held on the specified days. One day, I decided to follow her. I told Emily I was going on a business trip, but instead rented a car and trailed Evelyn. She led me to a small club on the outskirts of town. Nothing special at first glance, just an ordinary bar for locals. But when Evelyn went inside, she was greeted by a burly man who looked very much like Tony Russo from the photograph. I sat in the car for several hours, watching the entrance. When Evelyn finally came out, she was carrying a small sports bag that she didn't have before. Thoughts were swarming in my head. Gambling, drugs, money laundering. What had she gotten herself into? Returning home, I found Emily in tears. Michael, thank God you're back, she said, throwing herself on my neck. Mom. Something's happened to Mom. My heart sank. Had she been exposed? Arrested? What happened? I asked, feeling cold sweat run down my back. She's in the hospital, Emily sobbed. They said it's something with her heart. Oh, Michael, I'm so scared for her. I hugged my wife, trying to calm her down, but only one thought was spinning in my head. What if this is because of me? What if she found out about my surveillance and couldn't handle the stress? Standing by Evelyn's hospital bed, looking at her pale face and listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor, I realized I was at a crossroads. Tell Emily everything and destroy her image of her mother. Stay silent and become an unwitting accomplice. Or try to help Evelyn get out of this situation, risking being drawn into her dark affairs. The choice I had to make could change our entire family's life forever. A week later, Evelyn was discharged from the hospital. The doctor said it was a mild heart condition caused by stress. Emily insisted that her mother move in with us during her recovery. "Mom, you need to rest," Emily said, arranging medications on the bedside table. No volunteering. Just peace and rest," Evelyn smiled weakly. "Yes, dear, of course you're right," Emily replied. But I saw how restlessly Evelyn's eyes darted and how she constantly checked her phone. Something was clearly troubling her. One evening, when Emily was putting the kids to bed, I went into Evelyn's room under the pretext of bringing her tea. "How are you feeling, Evelyn?" I asked, placing the cup on the table. She looked at me with a long, studying gaze. "Michael, we need to talk." I felt my heart beat faster. "About what?" "You know something, don't you?" She looked me straight in the eyes. "You suspect something." I swallowed, feeling a chill run down my spine. "Evelyn, no need to make excuses." She raised her hand, stopping me. "I've seen how you've been watching me, how you've been going through my things." I felt shame color my face. "I didn't mean to." "I know," she sighed. "You were just worried." "But Michael, you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." Evelyn lowered her eyes, fidgeting with the edge of the blanket. "I wasn't always like this, you know. This perfect grandmother, volunteer, pillar of society." She smirked once. "I was a completely different person." "What do you mean?" I asked, although I already guessed the answer. "Gambling," Evelyn confessed. "It started when I was young. At first, just for fun, then it became something more. I was good, damn good." She looked at me, and I saw in her eyes a reflection of that woman from the photograph, confident, even a bit dangerous. But then Emily came along, and I decided to quit, to start a new life. Evelyn shook her head. "No, the debts didn't go away. And this Tony Russo, he's got me on the hook. I owe him a large sum, and the only way to pay it off is to gamble again." Evelyn nodded. "But now everything's gotten even more complicated. Tony is demanding more and more. I don't know how to get out of this." I sat stunned by her confession. Part of me wanted to condemn Evelyn, to yell at her for putting her family at risk, but another part understood her. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally asked. Evelyn looked at me with desperation in her eyes. "Because I need help, Michael. And you're the only one who knows the truth. I can't drag Emily into this. It would break her heart." I took a deep breath, realizing I was on the verge of a decision that could change everything. "What do you want me to do?" The following days were a blur. Evelyn's words echoed in my head, giving me no peace day or night. "Michael, you've been so distracted lately," Emily noticed at breakfast. "Is everything all right?" I tried to smile. "Yes, just a lot of work." "Don't worry." But inside, a storm was raging. I was facing a choice that could change the life of our entire family. Option 1. Tell Emily everything. Open her eyes to her mother's double life, the debts, and gambling. This would undoubtedly destroy her perfect image of Evelyn and might even ruin our relationship. But doesn't Emily deserve to know the truth? Option 2. Stay silent and become an unwitting accomplice. Continue to live as if nothing had happened, knowing that behind the facade of a perfect family life lies a dark secret. But could I live with this burden on my conscience? Option 3. Try to help Evelyn get out of this situation. But that would mean immersing myself in a world I know nothing about. A world of gambling debts and dangerous people like Tony Russo. Risk everything I have for a woman who has been lying to all of us for years. I looked at Emily and our children playing in the living room, and at Evelyn, who was smiling as she read them a fairy tale. This idyllic picture was so fragile, so deceptive. "Dad, come play with us," my daughter called. I nodded, getting up from the table. As I approached them, I caught Evelyn's gaze. In her eyes, I read a silent question, a plea for help. Time was running out. I knew I would soon have to make a choice that would determine not only my future but the future of everyone I love. Each option had its consequences, its risks, and none of them guaranteed a happy ending. Sitting on the floor with the children, putting together a puzzle, I thought about how easily this picture of family happiness could be shattered. One wrong step, one careless word, and everything would fall apart, like this puzzle. Evelyn caught my gaze and nodded almost imperceptibly. She knew what I was thinking about, knew that a decision had to be made soon. In the evening, putting the children to bed, I realized I couldn't postpone it any longer. Tomorrow, I must decide what to do. Lying awake next to the peacefully sleeping Emily, I went over all the options in my head. Each of them seemed both right and wrong at the same time. Morning came too quickly. I got up, feeling the weight of the impending decision. "Where are you going so early?" Emily asked sleepily. "Need to do something for work," I lied, kissing her on the cheek. Stepping out of the house, I took a deep breath of the cool morning air. Ahead lay a fork in the road with 3 paths, and I had to choose one of them. I took a step forward, ready to make a decision that would change everything. It was a typical Friday night when Julia, my wife of 8 years, mentioned she was heading out to a small gathering with some old high school friends. She looked stunning in her favorite dress, with a spark in her eyes that reminded me why I had fallen for her. This wasn't unusual. She had these outings once in a while, so when she kissed me goodbye, saying, "Don't wait up," I just smiled and told her to have fun. I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? But that night, as I settled down with a movie and a beer, I started to feel a strange sense of unease. She hadn't posted any updates on social media, something Julia usually did, especially when she dressed up and went out. But tonight, there was nothing. I told myself not to overthink it. She was probably just enjoying herself. I tried to relax, but as the hours crept on, I found myself glancing at the clock. Midnight passed, then 1:00 a.m., and still no word from her. By 2:00 a.m., I gave in to an urge I'd never had before. I opened our phone account and checked her call and text logs. It felt wrong, like I was betraying her privacy, but something in my gut pushed me forward. The name Evan came up repeatedly in her message history. They'd exchanged dozens of messages that night, and as I scrolled through, it became clear that Evan wasn't an old friend. He was someone new, someone she had been texting for weeks, even months. The messages had a casual, flirtatious tone, but one line in particular struck me like a punch to the chest. "Can't wait to see you tonight." My stomach dropped as I realized that this wasn't just an innocent reunion. Julia wasn't out with a group of friends, she was with him. She came back around 4:00 a.m., slipping in quietly, thinking I was asleep. Her hair was slightly messy, and she smelled of wine and something unfamiliar. She looked surprised to see me awake, sitting on the edge of the couch. "You're still up?" she asked, trying to sound casual. I didn't answer her directly, just nodded and asked, "How was the gathering?" She hesitated a bit too long. "It was fine," she said, her eyes avoiding mine as she kicked off her shoes by the door. I didn't push it. Not yet. I wanted all the details before I confronted her. In the days that followed, I played the part of the oblivious husband while quietly gathering evidence. I scoured through her social media, searched through our shared files, and found more messages, photos, and call logs between her and Evan. Bit by bit, I pieced together the time she had claimed to be with friends that lined up with messages to him. Finally, one night, I found what I needed. Julia left her phone unlocked while she took a shower, and in it, I found a picture of her and Evan, cozy on a sofa at his place. She was smiling, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm wrapped around her waist. Seeing them like that was a gut-wrenching blow, but I kept my emotions in check. This betrayal deserved a calculated response. Instead of a confrontation, I set my revenge into motion. First, I let her continue her routine, letting her think she had fooled me. Then I tracked down Evan online. He had his social media wide open, and I created a fake profile that looked like someone who could be friends with Julia's friends. Over time, I struck up an online friendship with him, asking casual questions that gave me insight into his world. He was unsuspecting, believing me to be just another friendly face. While Julia thought everything was fine, I also set up hidden cameras at home and recorded her conversations with him. I gathered weeks of material, enough to paint a clear picture of her deceit. Then the day arrived. Julia left for another gathering, and I knew she was going to meet Evan again. This time, I didn't sit back. I uploaded the videos and messages I collected, packaging them into a series of posts that outlined the entire story. I posted it anonymously on a popular online forum, framing it as a cautionary tale about infidelity and deceit. By the time Julia returned home, the posts were going viral. Her phone began buzzing constantly with notifications and messages. When she opened her social media, she went pale, seeing her own messages, her photos with Evan, all exposed for the world to see. "What's happening?" she stammered, her face crumbling as she turned to me, her eyes wide and tearful. "Did you do this?" I didn't respond. She knew the answer. Wordlessly, I packed a few of my things and left her standing in that empty silence. The trust she had shattered was gone forever, and the life she had tried to build with lies crumbled along with it. Sophia, a young hairdresser, witnesses a group of unruly teenagers harassing an elderly couple on the bus. Defending them earns her their gratitude, but the next day, an unexpected twist occurs. A luxurious limousine pulls up to her house, leaving her in shock. Who could have sent such a lavish gesture, and what do they really want? Hi everyone. Today, I'm excited to share a new story with you, so let's get started. Sophia, a 22-year-old hairdresser, worked in one of the most renowned salons in the heart of Paris. Born into a low-income family, Sophia couldn't afford to go to college. So, a year after graduating from high school, she followed her passion for beauty and learned how to care for hair. Though going to college had been her dream, she knew it wasn't financially possible, and the thought of large student loans discouraged her even more. Sophia's life was routine. She woke up early, jogged around the neighborhood, had breakfast, and headed to work. Since she didn't own a car, she walked to the bus stop every morning. For almost 4 years, Sophia lived according to this schedule. The only days she could rest were Sundays, when the salon was closed, or on her rare days off. Even then, Sophia often took private appointments, not letting any opportunity to earn money pass her by. Sophia didn't work around the clock out of love for her job, but out of necessity. Her mother, Jean, had become disabled after a severe accident that happened when Sophia was 17. She lost her ability to walk and now fully depended on her daughter for financial support. One evening, after a long day at the salon, Sophia boarded her usual bus home. The bus was full of noisy teenagers, and there was also an elderly couple. Ignoring the noise, Sophia put on her headphones and tried to relax, but soon she noticed that the teenagers started to harass the elderly couple. "What's going on here?" Sophia asked, standing up and approaching the boys. "And what's it to you?" One of them rudely replied, and the rest laughed. "I think you're talking about your own mother," Sophia responded calmly, not losing her composure. The boy's face flushed with anger. "Leave us alone and mind your own business," another teen demanded. "I will, right after you leave this couple alone and return the man's walking stick," Sophia said firmly. "And if we don't? What are you gonna do, Wonder Woman?" one of the boys mocked. "Trust me, you don't want to find out," Sophia warned. "And I hope your parents have enough money to bail you out when I send this video to the police." She held up her phone, showing the recording of their actions. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the boys backed down, and the one holding the walking stick quickly returned it to the old man. "Thank you so much," the elderly woman said, still shaken. "We were afraid they were going to rob us." "You're welcome," Sophia replied with a smile. Sophia decided to ride with the couple until their stop to make sure they were safe, even though it wasn't her usual stop. Afterward, she took a taxi back home, reflecting on what had happened. The next morning, while cleaning her house, there was a knock at the door. Expecting to see her brother, Sophia opened the door to find a man in a gray suit. "How can I help you?" Sophia asked, surprised. "My name is Pierre. I represent Oz's group." "My boss would like to meet with you," he said, gesturing toward a black limousine parked outside her house. "Your boss? Who is that?" Sophia asked, even more puzzled. "He prefers not to reveal his identity for now, but you'll recognize him when you see him," Pierre replied. Cautiously, Sophia declined the invitation. However, moments later, the limousine window rolled down, and she saw the elderly couple from the bus smiling warmly at her. "Oh my God! I wasn't expecting this," Sophia exclaimed, walking toward them. "We're so sorry if we frightened you," the elderly woman apologized. "But we wanted to thank you for what you did." As it turned out, the couple were millionaires, and the day before, they had decided to live modestly, which was why they were on the bus. They wanted to reward Sophia for her kindness. Pierre handed her a large envelope filled with money. Overwhelmed, Sophia burst into tears. "Is this really for me?" she asked, barely holding back her emotions. "Yes, Sophia," the elderly woman confirmed. "We know you have responsibilities, and we wanted to help in some small way." A few weeks later, Sophia used the money to open her own beauty salon. At first, she thought about using it to go to college, but eventually, she decided to invest in her passion. Within less than 2 years, her business thrived, and her family's life improved dramatically. Although Sophia never saw the elderly couple again, their generosity changed her life forever. Sophia's kind act didn't just change her circumstances, but also her perspective on life. In a world often driven by self-interest, she learned that genuine compassion can lead to unexpected connections and opportunities. Murphy Johnson became famous after his wife, Molly, posted a photo of their bedroom mirror on social media in 2015. The mirror featured a list of 13 items titled "Reasons I Love My Wife," including lines such as "She's my best friend," "She makes me laugh every day," and "She's the kindest person," among others. 2 years after that post, Molly passed away. The official cause of death was ruled as suicide from a drug overdose. However, her family and friends believe her husband was responsible for her death. Suspicion intensified in the summer of 2023 when it emerged that Murphy Johnson had kidnapped a teenager. According to the indictment, he abducted a 16-year-old girl and held her captive for around 6 weeks. He allegedly tied her to a bed, assaulted her, inflicted knife wounds, forced her to take drugs, and recorded videos of these acts. Murphy Johnson was sentenced to life in prison, while his 21-year-old girlfriend, Olivia Henn, received a 23-year prison sentence as an accomplice. Friends and family of Murphy Johnson's deceased wife, who passed away in 2017, told journalists they are convinced he had a hand in her death. They claim that the man once seen as America's kindest husband abused his wife and coerced her into relationships with other men. 7 months after the mirror photo went viral, in 2016, Molly filed a police report claiming her husband was beating her and threatening to kill her. However, she withdrew the complaint in 2017. "He subjected me to physical abuse, hitting me on the back and abdomen, on my head and arms, pushing me down and forcibly taking my purse, money, and phone so I couldn't escape," she stated in the report, as cited by journalists. Shortly after her visit to the police, Molly quit her job due to cuts and bruises on her body, her friends shared with journalists. These marks reportedly appeared after her husband forced her into intimate encounters with other men. She sent friends photos of her bruises and cuts and mentioned wanting a divorce but feeling too scared to proceed, fearing he would kill her and stage it as a suicide. In December 2017, After Molly was found dead, her husband claimed she had taken her own life. He insisted on cremating her body, preventing a full investigation, according to friends and acquaintances. They also pointed out that the fentanyl level in her blood was far too low for a typical suicide. It's been a few months since Christmas, and I'm just now getting around to telling the story of what happened on Christmas. My family and I decided to celebrate the holiday not at home, but at my father-in-law's house. We thought it would be more fun, and relatives were coming from another city, so it promised to be a big, noisy gathering. My wife, children, and I arrived at my father-in-law's house early to help with the preparations. Everything went as usual. We decorated the house, put up the Christmas tree, and prepared treats. Soon the relatives began to arrive, and the house was quickly filled with laughter, conversation, and the anticipation of the holiday. After greeting everyone, we all sat down at the table. My father-in-law had clearly gone all out, setting a table with everything you could want, all with a festive Christmas theme. The conversation was lively and, as is often the case in such gatherings, people became closer and less inhibited. Of course, there was a wide variety of drinks from champagne to cognac to keep the spirits up. I vividly remember the fireworks, though I can't remember everything. After dinner, we all went outside to watch the fireworks, then came back in, frozen and warmed up with a little more to drink. As the celebration reached its climax, the evening continued with more toasts and jokes. Some of us decided to move to the kitchen for a quieter spot to smoke and get a little break from the noise. Of course, smoking was paired with another round of drinks. In this semi-relaxed atmosphere, time seemed to fly by. I was beginning to feel tired after all the festive excitement. I decided to take a short rest to regain my strength. Nearby, I noticed an empty room with a cozy-looking bed, a real salvation at that moment. Without a second thought, I lay down on the bed, expecting just a few minutes of rest. Instead, exhaustion took over and I fell into a deep sleep. I began to regain consciousness much later that night, after all the fun and drinking. Still in a fog of sleep, I instinctively reached for a warm figure beside me, thinking it was my wife. I embraced her with warmth and tenderness, assuming it was her. I thought how nice it was to share this closeness after such a long day. As I became more fully awake, I slowly became aware of my surroundings and realized that I wasn't at home. I was in my father-in-law's house, and next to me was my mother-in-law. Memories from moments before suddenly hit me with a strange mixture of shock and embarrassment. In the fog of my mind, I had mistaken her for my wife. Determined to break the awkward silence, I quietly asked if she was awake. She calmly replied that she was. Trying to collect myself, I said, "I'm going to get a drink of water," hoping to clear my mind. She just nodded and reminded me to hurry, as the guests would be waking up soon. I made my way to the kitchen, gulped down a glass of water, and took a moment to collect my thoughts. I knew I would have to talk to her about this strange, unexpected event at some point. The festivities continued as the house came back to life, filled with the joyful sounds of family, and soon everyone gathered for breakfast. My wife, unaware of anything unusual, joined us, and the party continued seamlessly. At one point, my mother-in-law and I were alone in the kitchen having a quiet smoke. I gathered my courage and asked why she hadn't stopped me that night. Her answer surprised me. She didn't want me to feel embarrassed and said she would do anything to make me feel comfortable. Since that night, things have returned to normal on the surface. We still visit her sometimes, and she acts as if nothing unusual has happened. But in the back of my mind, I know I need to clarify my feelings and have an honest conversation with her. Maybe it's time to sort through this moment for both of our sakes and make sure it doesn't affect our family in any way. Frank Robinson looked like a man who had been through a lot but never lost his taste for life. Despite his age, he was still a strong man with a sharp mind and a firm grip. When he first saw Monica in a small, shabby diner on the outskirts of the city, she was like a breath of fresh air. Young, energetic, with long blonde hair framing her beautiful face, she smiled at him as she served coffee, and every move she made felt like a promise of something more. Frank became a regular at the place, and soon they began